அதுக்கப்புறம் நான் இப்போ டிஸ்டர்பன்ஸ் mute.
இல்லை இன்னும் மாற்றல சிஸ்டர், அப்படியே தான் இருக்கு. இன்னும் மாற்றல.
பண்ண முடியுதுமா? ஓகே ஓகே
எல்லாரும் ஆடியோ
So, dear Market College family members, photo shoot is about to start. I request everyone to be on the form.
அம்மா ஒரு தூக்கம் வந்துட்டு போயிடுச்சு போங்க.
கௌசல்யா. Start. கௌசல்யா. கௌசல்யா. நான் பேசுறது கேட்கல. கேக்குதா மேம்? கேட்கல. கேக்குதா? கேக்குதா? கௌசல்யா பேசுறதா? அதுதான்.
On the behalf of Immaculate College for Women, I wish everyone a very good noon. Thank you for being with us and also spending a precious time during this pandemic. On this occasion, I gracefully invite you all for the webinar on day 2. Let me give you some instructions regarding this webinar. Participants must mute the video during the entire period of the webinar. Do not click on the share screen also. Joining time, leaving time, and duration of the session attended will be recorded. To clarify any query with the resource person, you can use the chat box after 30 minutes. Questions will be polled after the session. Kindly answer them. Finally, 2 days attendance is mandatory for e-certificate and it will be sent to the participant's mail ID on or before 15 July 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for playing the video. A very good afternoon, everyone gathered here. I really feel glad and happy to welcome you all on the second day session on the topic, the future of digital learning. Last day's session was so amazing, and both the session shares went extra mile and shared their knowledge with us. Without further delay, let's start today's session. One song can change a moment. One idea can change a world. One step can start a journey. But a prayer can change even the impossible. Respected dignitaries, my dear friends and colleagues, let's evoke God's blessing.
It was so divineful. The session is about to start. Dear participant, I request all the participants to mute your audio and video. If you have any queries, you can drop it in a chat box during an allotted time, which will be addressed by our organizing committee to a resource person. An investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. Today's session by our resource person, Mr. Vincent English, was so informative, filled with the knowledge where we could learn a lot of information and knowledge from it. Let us continue the wonderful session. May I request our resource person, Mr. Vincent English, to take over the session. Over to Mr. Vincent English, our resource person.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here again. I was very impressed yesterday with the interest and the desire to be more inclusive and better educators. So with the feedback I got from the lecture yesterday, I've made some small little changes to today's lecture to refresh it slightly. So I'll make a start. I'm going to share my screen. My screen is going to go into full view so that you'll be able to see it more clearer, which means that unfortunately I'm not able then to see any messages, any text messages that comes up. So it doesn't mean that I'm ignoring you, it just means that I can't see you. Okay, so my lecture is about the future of digital learning. I'm expressing my views from both a education practitioner and also someone who's involved in the industry of education. So my main role is the chief executive officer of a large American multinational company called Vernier Technology. I'm in charge of a good part of the world, not at all, but we manufacture things called data logging devices that are connecting, any kind of data a science teacher would want, from pH to temperature, physics especially, and that will connect by Bluetooth into mobile phones and draw graphs in real time in any smart device. So that we thought would be in the future of education just 5 years ago. But with the change in technologies and how technology is progressing, we no longer feel that the future lies in the hands-on approach, purely hands-on approach. We now see, and through the other research that I do at Cambridge University as part of my teaching role, I teach at Cambridge in the Faculty of Education, and my research is about digital education of the future through artificial intelligence. But my other role is, I suppose, the connection back to business. I started my life as a physicist. That's my background in mathematics. But I morphed into the more management role in business. So now I teach business strategy at the Unesco University in Rome, where I have a visiting professorship there. So that's my background. So it might give you a flavor for the approach I'm going to take. It might give you an idea of how I view education, what I see for the future. And along the way, I mentioned other committees and organizations of which I'm involved in to try and give you a feeling of where my opinion comes from and how it is built. So really this graph is kind of a hybrid between somebody making hand drawing notes, we'll say physical notes on a piece of graph paper, superimposed then with some kind of digital image. And that is how I view education. I view education is changing, there's nothing we can do about that. Technology is moving at a rate that none of us can neither predict or sometimes even keep up with. So there has to be some kind of change in education going forward, whether we like it or not. And I feel that we should embrace education. We should embrace the changes and take the best out of the new revolution in education and technology and make it fit and make it work for us in the best way we can. And sometimes that does mean some kind of a hybrid approach from traditional methods to including the new methods. Because I don't really believe that it's possible to morph completely one way or the other. But just to give you a context of how important education is becoming in the world, it's a huge industry and it is getting bigger. The OECD countries devote something like 11.3% of public spending to education. On average, roughly, the American government spends $10,500 more or less per student per year. Spending per student on primary and secondary education has increased by almost 20% year on year since 2006. Unesco's Sustainable Development Goals, which is on their website, they have 12, and I remember correctly, maybe more, I forget the number, but there's a few of them, is that every one of its 193 or so members of UNESCO will commit to spending between 4 and 6% of their gross domestic product, or otherwise between 15 and 20% of the total public expenditure that they have. So either maybe 6% of their exports, what they earn through exports, or at least between 15 and 20% of the public expenditure pot to be devoted to education. And that goal, the Sustainable Development Goal, is for 2030. So they hope that developed countries, let's say, or the 193 members that go to make up UNESCO, will commit those substantial funds to education. And that, if nothing else, shows that those that are looking after the world's economies realize that without education, we really are going to be struggling as a world, not only to develop, but only, and just look at the problems that face the world now with the coronavirus, you know, having the technical competences and having the, if you like, infrastructure for scientific go power in place to address all these challenges is going to be hitting us. Even challenges right now, we do not know what they might be. And it's really growing. UNESCO is insisting on growing this contribution simply because there are more and more young people to be educated. Some of the demographics of the world shows that some countries are perhaps aging populations. There are other countries where the 60 or 70% of the population is under 25 years of age. And these are the future of the world. They are the future that hopefully will bring the world through the way the world should be brought through, with the rights and correct morals, breaking down hatred, breaking down barriers. And sport is also important in that. And I will touch upon that as we go a bit further on to this lecture. But nonetheless, the Millennium Development Goals aim for the universal primary education by 2015 don't seem to have been met. So we hope that there's new urgency towards the 15 to 20% of the public expenditure, or 6% of GDP, by 2030 will at least show that is heading in the right direction. So why is education, the interest in education, growing? Well, it's quite simple. People are now making the link between education and economic success. And it's growing because more people need to be educated, as mentioned before. So 91% of children in developing countries were enrolled up to 83% in 2000, and an increase of 43 million children. So what we're seeing here is that in the year 2000, there was 30.2% enrolled in education between 0 and 14 years of age. This is what's looking at here. 2015, we can see, as the population is increasing in the world, we can see that the enrollment rate is now falling. So the world is not able to keep up with the percentage of enrolled children in education between the ages of 0 and 14 as the population is increasing. As we go to 2030, it is now predicted that only 23% of an expected population of 8.5 billion will be enrolled in education. And I think this is a very sad situation. I think that we are looking at huge problems going into the future, especially for areas of very, very high population growth, India being an obvious example, where we have a stable democracy in place, as opposed to a huge population in China, where we have not a democracy, but we don't know what direction that country will take on the whim of the Politburo. But we do know India is a very solid country based on very solid principles. And we know India is a country of some very, very great people, some great empathetic people. So I look towards India as being perhaps the powerhouse one day that may save this world, given that its tradition of education, given its tradition of great people that has come from India. I'm not saying that because I'm talking to you now in India. I'm saying that because I firmly believe that. So you can see, if you get a view of I suppose, what the world holds for us, we can see that there is little doubt that this equation balances. Education simply means economic success. So, you know, how do we transform the skills and the dispositions of people so that our future workers can be equipped and fit for purpose? Well, there are lots of initiatives out there. There are lots of people doing projects, and the group that's part of the CEDA group in Cambridge that I'm part of, there are 3 people out there, Professor Weigeriff, Professor Hennessy, and a few others. I think also, yeah, Neil Mercer as well, Professor Neil Mercer. They are trying to find out, by using technology, how we can transform the skills and dispositions of the future learners, or the learners who are perhaps leaving school, or those who are in employment that want to be upskilled. How can we make them effective for the workplace, given the new technologies and the new challenges that pose us, both as employers and educators at the same time? So technical and practical skills are needed, along with transferable skills. You know, the simple things like effective teamwork, the ability to problem solve, the ability to be creative. Many businesses at the moment are keen to establish links with education. I see that all the time, because they want their voices heard. They want ready to go graduates that can come out of their universities and they're able to make an instant contribution, rather than having to be spoon-fed, like much of the Western education system has produced graduates that are not able to problem solve, they're not able to collaborate, they're not able to be creative. So certain initiatives, for example, such as the virtual internship project, has been started at Cambridge, and it looks to providing a proof of concept model, a new approach, if you like, that shows how the potential can exist or be developed to change. We'll say secondary school students leaving the schools and to become either more adaptable or ready for university education, or ready to join the framework and contribute as early as possible. So if you look at how education is expanding, you look towards countries or areas such as Asia. The OECD evaluates its 72 national school systems using the PISA targets. You might be familiar with those. It's the metric that's used across Europe to find out how well an education system is doing. Not actually in Europe, is around the world actually. And countries like Finland are constantly #1. I remember being in Helsinki, visiting our local office, and it was the first time in 10 years that the Finnish government or the Finnish education system didn't finish #1 in the world. I forget who overtook them. I think it might have been China, but that was later discredited because the information that China had submitted to the PISA authority had proved to be incorrect. But there was huge panic in Finland. The fact that they thought, I was there the day it made the front page papers in Helsinki, and there was panic to think that their education system had slipped even a little bit. So, and if you look at a small population that exists in Finland, you look at a country that's only in the bottom 10 or 15% of it is really habitable. The rest of the north area is mostly plunged in darkness because it's so near the Arctic Circle, and the territory or the terrain isn't really much use for anything. But yet, those people have produced some of the world's most innovative and biggest companies that that have produced technology that's changed the world. And you look at Nokia as one example, and there are many others. So you do have to think that in order for the economy to grow, not only in an economic way, but in a way that leads it in the right way through the right, I suppose, conditions, and certainly in the right culture and with the right morals and ethics, I think education has to be the starting place. I don't believe it is possible to do it otherwise. So if you look, for example, since 1970, there has been a massive explosion in tertiary education. And when I talk about tertiary education, I talk about education that follows secondary schools. That's the term we use over in Europe and mostly in the UK and mostly in Australia, not surprisingly. It means third level. It means the level of college after secondary school. It means university. It means it's a catch-all category. As universities have become more accessible, enrollments have soared. You can see that. We don't know. In 1970, there were 33 million enrolled in tertiary education. And then you can see by the year 2000, it's gone to 100 million in 2010, 182, and 2014 is up to 208 million. And this really, and the greatest expansion of this has happened in Korea, where now the highest proportion of graduates is 60 in the world is now 60. Well, it was, we'll say around about 2014. I don't know what the latest are, but it was 60-odd%. Well, I think 68% of those students that left secondary school went on to become university graduates. I know in Ireland, where I am now, I know that the rate of secondary school students that go to university is now in the 80%. So perhaps the data that I have, and I've been working from a Harvard study, is probably a little bit out of date. But I think that that's the point. The point, the fact is that you can see where countries have this propensity to ensure access to tertiary education, whether it's vocational or academic at the third level, you can see direct correlations with either how an economy can grow or how economy can bounce back quickly. And those of you who are probably following or interested in the world economics will know that Ireland had a terrible time when in the economic crash, the country of only 4 to 5 million people ended up with a national debt somewhere in the region 120 billion euros. But now in 4 or 5 years, the country has retransformed itself, and before Corona was heading back again to be one of the fastest growing economies in Europe again. And that is purely because of the very, very strong education infrastructure and the ubiquity of suitable graduates in all the domains. So this is kind of summarizing really the number of students that have been enrolled as we go through 2014 up to 1970 to 2014. You can see that the Asia is showing strong contributions everywhere. It started off in 1970 as not being the biggest, but you can see as these rings, concentric rings, expand, you get a sense. You can see quite easily that they now contribute something in the region of 56% of the world contribution to tertiary education. And not surprisingly, they become economic powerhouses. So when I talk about Asia, I'm talking about from Singapore, that Pacific Rim area, all the way around to China, Hong Kong, that area, Taiwan, and then wrapping around again, possibly picking up the edge of Japan. But mostly it is China. There's no point in denying that. But it gives you an idea of how education is developing and who is placing the biggest emphasis on it. And you can see that that particular area is given a strong contribution to education. There's no surprise that their economies are dominating the world now. And even through those of you who are still involved in academic reading and writing and stuff, whatever domain you're in, and my sort of research interests have taken me across everything from education itself to physics and not so much maths these days, but into business, especially where my PhD is. And I have noticed more and more and more academic contributions by Chinese authors. They are almost now becoming accepted that a lot of the references you'll quote in any particular study will be Chinese, and especially in things like data analytics and that area. So education, I think, where are we now then? Is education the fourth industrial revolution? You can see that there's been certain contributions, external contributions through the industrial revolutions of the world that has changed things, that has allowed the economies to open up and to take off. One of them was in America, why America ended up as it has been and still is a powerhouse of the world. That was kickstarted in no small way by the railroads. The railroads came into the America, it connected all the cities together, which meant that goods and raw materials were easily transported from one part of the country to the other reliably through trains, which meant that the economy was simply opened up. And we can also look at air travel perhaps too, and the internet as other triggers for, larger economic growth. So where is the next one? Where is the very, very next industrial revolution going to come from? Well, I think it's education. That's what I think. I think that it's transforming, technology is transforming the way we work, we play, and we think. It's happening very, very quickly. It's almost an exponential growth. And it's happening on such a huge scale that the railroads could never, for example, if you were to take back a comparison with the Americans and how the railroads opened up the American economy, railroads can't go under the sea, they can't go across where there's no land, but the internet can, and technology can. So that is why I think at the moment we're now looking at a situation where there is now more a level playing field than there is ever been before. And what I mean by that is that innovation and education using the technology that's now becoming ubiquitous, any economy, whether it's developed or developing, has the ability to seize these opportunities and to bring their offering and to bring what they have worldwide in an instant. And I say that simply because when I was looking at the introduction to the college that came on the first thing before the prayer, it struck me that there was before my eyes a huge amount of ability and talent that had all the infrastructure in place that could take that and very easily transform that onto a digital platform and make that worldwide. And not only, and of all the Indians that I have met, and Indian scientists, they're all very, very competent on teachers and everything else. And to be able to take that and to bring that worldwide in a very affordable way. And that leads into another one of my goals, is to make education not only accessible, but to make it affordable. So really what we need to do. What we need to do is to look at making education the tool that helps the young people of today thrive in tomorrow's world. And that even is the biggest challenge, because we don't even know what tomorrow's world will look like. Only 6 months ago, we did not know what coronavirus was. We did not know the impact it would have on us. So not only environmental shocks, even the way education or even the way technology is changing, we don't even know what that future space is going to look like. But we must try and fill it. But what we do know is that half of today's work activities will most likely be automated by 2055. And less than 5% of the occupations that will be able, only 5% of the occupations will not be able to be automated completely. But 60% could see 30% of their constituent activities automated. So from that very, very lucky 5% of occupations, the 95% that's left will have to some degree their occupations impacted by the future of technology. Now, and that can happen in very ways that are probably not obvious. Just take, for example, a lawyer. a solicitor. My son has just graduated his degree in law yesterday. He passed his exams, thank God. And he is more interested in the technology associated with law than he is in the practice of law. Because he knows, and he very often reminds me, that blockchain technologies may only be, if you like, at the moment, the domain of finance, but blockchain technologies are developing in such a way that a blockchain will follow you around like a piece of DNA in your body. It'll have all the information about you, your bank account, your taxation, what you paid in taxes, how many speeding fines you've had, what you own, what your assets are. So by using the mobile phone of the future, you can go and purchase a house from somebody by just hitting a blockchain app, and the app will go through all the procedures. It'll do all the property searches that is necessary. It'll do all the transactions, all the clearances of all the contracts. And then when everything is done, then it'll exchange the funds or pull down the mortgage that will pay for the properties, whatever it might be. It'll have all and everything you need attached in a single blockchain, a bit like a DNA that goes to make us all up. We all have our own DNA. And we will also all have our digital DNA, which will be our blockchain. So there's an example of something that you probably could never have imagined, that artificial intelligence will come in and make a huge difference, with disruptive difference. I'm sure it'll happen to a medicine where the doctor will only see you if the blockchain decides that you need one-to-one specialist help. But don't for 1 minute underestimate that blockchain won't have some influence in education too. How? I don't know. So education, really, it must adapt for the fourth industrial revolution. It must adapt for this new 21st century. It needs to equip today's people with the skills to thrive in tomorrow's world, as we said before. But computers can not only be programmed to fulfill many human tasks, but they can learn how to do things themselves, as I'll get onto a bit later on. And within just a few years, we see things like artificial intelligence out there. We see robotics, nanotechnologies. We see 3D printing, where I was talking only last night, I got a call from a friend of mine who is the dean of the medical school in Bari, University of Bari in Italy. And they have now developed and ready for market, where instead of putting in an artificial tooth, that one they pull out, they can use what they call that again, your genes, I forget what they call that, where they can develop and build a tooth based on your own DNA. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, at one stage I was disbelieving him, but he proved to me, and well, didn't prove me, he insisted that this technology was now ready to go. Extraordinary. It's almost like 3D printing gone crazy now. It's a new development of 3D printing. We're not just printing something from a CAD drawing now, we're printing something from your DNA. Now that is just extraordinary. I'm really, when this corona is over, I'm going to go to Bari and see for myself, because I think this is extraordinary. But not only that, but this is extraordinary in the sense that it is so, I think, economic to do and so cheap to do, it can also transform the health of people worldwide too, in areas where, you know, we'll say National Health Service isn't quite so ubiquitous as it is anywhere else. So really, I'm saying too that in the future, because of technologies, the work that we do will be structured more around managing the projects, not the processes. The processes will be taken over by the artificial intelligence. We will be just there to oversee it, to make sure all these processes are joined up together, the dots are joined, and everything is done correctly. And because of that, we have to reflect it in how we deliver education in the future too. So are we looking for something which is active learning or problem-based learning? Is it the way is learning engaging to engage students' as natural curiosity, rather than just simply presenting them with the information from the textbook or the teacher in the normal transmission mode? But whatever else that we need to do as teachers, it is our fundamental duty to try and reshape the people on the future contributors, the future scientists, the future leaders. It is up to us to lay the foundations for that. It is our job, it's our function, we have, frankly, the most important job in the world. So, well, how do you go about, to teach a digital native when all he has to do or she's got to do is to go on to Google and find what they want in an instant? Information is so widely available. It's different in my day when I needed to find out something. I was in classroom in school. The teacher perhaps wasn't particularly good, or I was sitting too far away from the blackboard and I couldn't see what's being written, so I couldn't follow it, and I didn't realize until I needed correcting spectacles until I was 16, and just enough time to get through my final diplomas for secondary school to get to university. But for whatever reason, maybe there's noise in the classroom, those want to listen can't hear. But now the students can go away and they can construct their own learning environment. They can go on to YouTube, they can go on to Google, they can try and find out another way of something being explained to them. Perhaps they didn't quite understand how the teacher explained something, but now they can go on to Google and they go on to a blog or somewhere, and they can see what other people are saying about that particular construct or that particular aspect of the course, and they can understand it in a different way. So really what we're saying is that education is now on demand. It's at our fingertips. And that has a knock-on effect too. We do not need to memorize facts anymore. And I may be the same for you, but certainly for me, I do not know what my wife's telephone number is. I do not know what my 3 children's telephone number is. Because why? I just press their name on my phone and it comes up. I've never had the need to memorize them. I know I should, but I haven't got around to it. I never see the numbers. They just dial out. The only number I know is my own one and my office number. That's it. I don't know any other numbers. So the world is changing, and there's no point in trying to hold back the tide on our own. We must embrace and change with it. So memorizing facts perhaps is not the way to go anymore. Memorizing large amounts of poetry is perhaps not the way to go anymore. Although, there are both sides of this argument. I'm not saying that that is the right way. We don't know yet, of course. But what we do need to do is to build the skills to help us manage the formidable tools at our disposal, to make the most of them, to make them work for us, to make them so that what actually happens is the boundaries now between the traditional curricula is starting to become blurred. And that is manifested more, I think, than in any other country in Finland, where now they are looking at, I suppose, a more holistic and a real world way about teaching and learning about anything from history or geography to writing stories or building a boat or whatever it might be. And whenever I visited schools in Finland, I've always been amazed by how they've been learned, how they've been laid out, where students have access by smart keys into various areas of learning of which they are interested in. So those that are not involved in, we'll say, engineering studies don't go into that department. Their smart card won't bring them there. It is all tailored to get the best out of the students and what they now call a phenomenon-based learning system. And what that does, it emphasizes skills such as communication, creativity, critical thinking, and all those things that is thought that's going to need to be important in this new 21st century workplace. Finland have frankly recognized as having one of the most successful education models. I mean, that's without doubt. It is adopting this new approach because of an increase in proportion of teaching time that has been under pressure for a long time. So what Finland is actually doing under its 2016 national framework, it's having students to participate in interdisciplinary modules where they help to plan and access that information themselves. So what's happening here in Finland is that they started off with an 5-stage inquiry-based approach, which took education and, if you like, flipped it back to front. So, and I will talk about this now in the classroom of the future in a second. But what this means is that the traditional method of standing in front of a classroom and just transmitting knowledge is something they've abandoned many years ago. They look towards inquiry-based learning to challenge the students to transfer the ownership of the thinking, of the methodology of how to go about education, how to merge education together into some coherent whole. And they've asked them to actively participate in their own learning. And this has led the European Commission to think that the student of the future will possibly construct their own learning and in their own way, but it'll be guided by the teacher. So that, for example, the teacher will provide the direction, the teacher will provide the facility for the learning to occur. It'll hopefully be through a dialogic process in the true conversational theory sense, in the true passing-in sense. And it will be delivered in collaboration with the students. So the students then will take ownership of their learning. They will go away and they will take a bit from YouTube. They will take a bit from the book. They will take a bit from a TV. They will take a bit from their friends. They will take a bit from perhaps a chatbot. But they are, if you like, taking the ingredients to build, taking the ingredients to make the cake and mixing the ingredients in the right ways that they want themselves. So the cake can be either made a lot of fruit in it, or the cake may have no fruit in it, the cake may have some cream in it, the cake may have some icing on the top, the cake may have chocolate in it, the cake may not have chocolate in it, it doesn't matter, it's still a cake. And what they're doing is they're taking the bits together themselves to personalize that learning. They're taking control of the learning, they're taking ownership of the learning. And that has to be, because the way the world is changing, in my view, we have to start giving some ownership back to the students, putting the onus back on them. And really what happens is the teacher now has to look at taking a very different role in leading education into the future, because really we're moving into uncharted territory. One of my good friends is a professor at a local university. His name is Jason Palfram, and he teaches HR and some other business courses, but he is a chartered psychologist himself. And he has been working on the flipped classroom approach for the last number of years. And what that really means is that he is flipping he's flipping the classroom back onto the students, and he just becomes, if you like, the meddler, the medals, or it becomes the orchestrator. So this is how he works. So a week before the lecture, up on the virtual learning environment platform, he will post all of the pre-recorded lectures, he will post all of the reading material, and then he will pose questions and, if you like, suggestions of what students should do and how students should engage in it. And what that means is that he has taken the homework and putting it before the class rather than after the class. And the net effect has been that when a student comes into the class, they all sit around in a very relaxed way and they discuss the lecture that they have pre-watched. They will discuss the materials that he has posed for discussion. And what's happening, two things are happening within a true dialogic sense, that there is learning going on between the teacher and the student and the student and the teacher. Now that means, and the student, of course. But what that means is this: the teacher is learning from the student and the student is learning from the teacher. And what they do is, if there's concepts that are not quite, let's just say, easy, then the teacher then will get to know what the concepts are not easy to understand and how and why students are struggling with those concepts. So they engage in something called teaching redundancy. And what that means is again, it's part of conversational theory from Gordon Pask, and really it is the fundamental underpinning of the cybernetics of learning, is where there's feedback loops that go continuously back and forth, not just one, not just two, not just three, but as many as is necessary. And at some point, and that's redundancy, because that's the kind of what others would regard as being a wasted time, but it isn't. And what that means is that the students are able to articulate what they think they know and explain it in their own way. And other students are able to combine and articulate that in their own way. So you get multiple interpretations of the same concept, which hopefully at the end of the dialogue are true and they are absolutely accurate. And at that stage then, the student is able to understand the concept from many different perspectives. And the professor is able to understand or be sure that the student has grasped the concept before they move on again. So as he says to me, and I'll just quote on something he just said to me now, he says, the next generation of spaces is going to be flipped. And he says, the teacher is now a meddler. It doesn't need to stand in front of the class to impart their wisdom. And students don't come to class just to listen. So they don't need to sit in rows facing the front. And why do they even need to sit in the front? In the education system of the future, homework will happen before the lesson. Teachers can record structured content for you or the student to absorb at their own pace. Then when you come into classroom, they can help you solve the problem. And that's what a flipped classroom is. It is bigger. It's bigger than the classroom. It's because it's the size of the living room. It's the size of the world. It's no longer confined to a small space. It's also an ability to back up what they call blended learning too. So it's the face-to-face and it's the online as well. Now, how that's going to be affected by Corona, we don't know, but nonetheless, that was a very, very good and successful ways that he had developed. It's not unique, it's out there before, but he devised his own way of doing it. So as I just mentioned before I put the slide up here, that the teacher's the meddler, it's more the orchestrator. The students can sit where they want, they come when they want, they learn their own time. However, the most important thing is students will come to class and they will collaborate. And the reason that they will collaborate is because they've developed a prior knowledge, and that prior knowledge has really underscored a confidence. So they have the confidence to talk and speak up, and they know that when they come to the class, they know a little bit about what the class is going to be about, only if they even just looked quickly at what was planned for the class. So that leaves us now to a dilemma that's facing especially in the European Commission, about what will the learning space of the future look like. Now, they've commissioned lots of reports, expensive reports, and they've come back to a timeline and they're trying to predict what it's going to look out to 2030 and beyond. But nobody foresaw the Corona pandemic, and that might change how it is viewed. But I'll just share with you the thinking thus far. And really what they were saying is, and this picture kind of is like a metaphor, it's not every room should be this size, but maybe they can be too. That's really they're looking at the different variety of places and situations and facilitations that will be made available for students to learn, whether it's going to be peer-to-peer with each of them themselves, whether it's going to be a one-to-one teacher, whether it's going to be in large spaces, whether it's going to be practically grounded, whether it's going to be hands-on, whether it's going to be virtual, whatever. The learning space of the future can be many different things. However, collaboration will be the core skill. Now that is regardless whether we do it online, whether we do it face-to-face. Routine tasks can be taken over by computers, but if that being the case, then we have to ensure that workers are trained and therefore valued for the creativity they can bring and the intuition that only humans can offer, despite how good our artificial intelligence chatbots and processors might become. There's still going to be a need, for the teacher in the classroom to bring that intuition there, to bring the creativity there, to mold or change the pedagogical approach to make it more effective. So we do have to look, I suppose, in a way that we are developing technologies that can help fill holes because of poor funding, government funding, poor resources. They can take the slack in some areas. But the human input in terms of innovation and collaboration and communication and orchestration has to still be there, I believe. I don't believe that can ever be lost. So much of the work, I suppose, these days, and that really brings me to wondering about how the science laboratory of the future will look. in terms of this social distancing. There is now obviously a problem in having a lot of students working in a small space because we have a limited laboratory space. They're very often quite small and quite crowded. Very often you need 2 or 3 students per piece of equipment to work collaboratively in an experiment. I don't know how that's going to happen. That's something that I've thought about, and I really can't come to any great conclusion about that. Perhaps maybe some kind of interactive software combined with maybe a live demonstration. I don't know. That's going to be one of the challenges for sure. So really, technology then, how is it going to shape the education of the future as it's seen by the European Commission and others? What is the learning space of the future going to look like? I know one of the directors of, I think it was the Association of University Technology Managers once said that when technology arrives in the classroom, all it was doing was enhancing the blackboard or the whiteboard or the projection surface. And that is very true. It wasn't really anything other than a handy device, you know. It wasn't taking over the education plan or the education resources. It just wasn't doing that. It wasn't the be all and end all. It wasn't that 360 turnaround that we thought it would be. It's not how it was allowed to completely change the role of the teachers. It didn't happen. I don't think it can happen. But now in the, before again, as I said again, the pre-COVID situation, the future teaching space, as the European Commission saw that, and this is one of the steering groups that I sit on for the European Commission. I'm one of 6 members from industry, along with IBM, Apple, Volvo Cars, and I think 2 others, forget who they are now. But we meet once a year and we discuss the research findings that's been put out there and has been come back, and we look at how maybe the future technology space or the teaching space can look like. So this concept was brought out. It originally started with a 5-stage concept, and now increased to a 6-stage concept, and it's called the Future Lab. And when I say Future Lab, I just talk about the classroom. It can be for anything, but this is a particular one that I'm just going to use now for maybe a more scientific or a transformational or a coding, let's just say, example. So what happens is then, as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different stages or areas, if you like, within the classroom. Now this classroom can be changed and around to reflect different stages, but just for clarity, we just kind of spread it out over quite a big space. Now this might look like it's quite big, but in fact this particular room in Brussels is not that big at all. It's the size of a standard classroom, but it's sectioned off. So the students enter into the first area, which is the present area. As you can see, the seating is informal. It looks a bit like a cricket stadium, the seatings, or the football stadium, and students just sit down here, cross-legged on the ground if they want, or sit on these benches, these kind of simple, straightforward benches. And at the front then, they've got their interactive whiteboard, and the teacher or the instructor sits here. So the function of this particular first stage is where the concept of what it is they're going to study is presented to them. So if we're looking at, take something simple and be a science experiment, and they're doing some kind of experiment on plant growth or whatever it might be, the concept is discussed here with the students, and then the students then have to discuss the concept back with the teacher. And then at this point here, having got enough information about what is going to be studied, the students then formulate their hypotheses. What they expect is going to happen, what they think should happen, and really what the students committing the students to be engaged by committing them to give an opinion, and that engages them. So now the students are part of the learning process, and they're also taking ownership of their own learning. Once that's agreed, then they can go in groups, or more than likely groups, and then go into the investigation area, which could be the science lab, or it could be just a small separate section in another room someplace in the school, and then they will start to conduct the experiments on the plant to see maybe does it grow better in whatever, certain fertilizers or whatever it might be. And then they will investigate and compare that against their hypothesis. Does it match? Is there a mismatch? Do they have to go back and reevaluate the hypothesis, or do they have to rethink the whole thing, the experiment procedure? There is, if you like, a dialogue and a cybernetic, we'll say, exchange between these two sections here. And once they're happy with their findings, or once they're happy that they've gone as far as they go, they then go into the create area. And this particular area is a small area with some TV cameras. Well, actually, a mobile phone is good enough. And a bit of a backdrop here so they can project their PowerPoint on the back of it. And then as a group, then they'll present their findings and it's just recorded. It is then sent over here to an area into a repository by the European Commission. And you have to remember there are 10,000 schools involved in this initiative now. So there's quite a few students in that 10,000 cohort. And is put up on the European Commission portal where students around Europe, I think the world too, can engage then with these students. They can see the pre-recorded sessions and they can get together, these students virtually, and they can ask them what they found and why they did the experiment a certain way and would they have done it differently now that they've had time to think about it, and so on. So the collaborative learning then has happened here, peer-to-peer learning. Okay, so we have the teacher to student and student to teacher, the self-discovery over here, the presentation of the facts, and then the peer-to-peer learning here. So then they may, after the feedback, come back and redevelop their ideas again, and then finally go into an interactive area then where they can share it once more with more peer. So you can see that we're looking at a collaborative approach. We're looking at a way that transforms learning and at least tries to address the future needs of students for the future. I realize I'm working on a bit of time here, so I'll try and speed up a bit. So transforming education can be expensive. We know that. Who's going to pay for it? The UN Sustainable Goals are all very well, but you need an additional 26 million teachers around the world to make that happen. It's quite clear that you need to forge stronger links with industry and perhaps use some public-private partnerships to now look at the schools of the future, where schools can now be more sort of funded from outside the traditional roles. So really, I suppose the future classroom is trying to increase competencies in teachers for roles of students. It's trying to encourage different learning styles, more personalized active learning, as I mentioned, the construction of their own learning space. It's trying to design an environment where students can feel like they can participate. It's informal. And of course, making use of the current and emerging technologies all the time. So just something that you should be aware of too is what these call these massive open online courses. They're called Moocs for short. They are free access courses that are available from lots of providers. I've lost count of how many there are now, but it started originally with the universities of Harvard and MIT. And they started by just making some of their coursework available online because they wanted to do that to I suppose, to give something back. And of course, a commercial company seized upon this and decided, okay, this is a good idea. So people can join, they can do something like an 8-week course, 4-week course. They're generally around 5, 6 weeks. And they can sometimes do it for free, or sometimes they can pay for them. And they get what's called micro-credentials. These are just downloadable certificates of participation. Sometimes there's a multiple choice exam they can do too. They have to score at 70% or more. And I wonder, is this a predictor for the future of education? Are people going to go the micro-credential route because they were not able to access education formally because maybe their socio-economic conditions didn't allow for it? They weren't able to get the entry points to bring them into university when they left school. For a whole raft of reasons, people are turned towards these micro-credentials. And whether they're going to be accepted as real currency in the future labour market remains to be seen, frankly, because there is a way around them. I signed up for an early Mooc many years ago, and I didn't even get the chance to even do the first lecture, but they sent me a certificate of completion anyway. So you begin to wonder. And also I tried as an experiment, one that I found a course that I knew absolutely nothing about. It couldn't be more different. I knew nothing about it. And I decided, I wonder, can I pass this course without even watching a single lecture? So I went through it and I did all the things I needed to do to get as far as the weekly exam. I had Google open on one computer, one screen. I had the exam open on the other. I completed the exam, no problem, 80% passed. got my nice certificate. So whether they're going to be acceptable or not. I'm not going to delay on this because I've been talking a bit too long, but these are the various providers, the kind of market share they have in the world. You can see that, you know, some of them we're talking about of so-called, we'll say, participants. And I know FutureLearn had something like 50 million participants. Now, when I say participants, that's people who just logged on for a course but never finished the course. The attrition rates is quite extraordinary. I think it's something like 90% will never get past week 2 on these things, and a further 80% will never return back again to do another course. So are they the future? I mean, I don't know. They might be something to help. I don't think they're going to transform education, but they won't disappear either, I don't believe. And these are the main providers. This is the data's bit out of date. I know that FutureLearn is far bigger than that now, as I mentioned before. And again, it's pretty old data, but you get the idea there that 58 million will say took that, you know, 7,000 courses roughly over, you know, 700 universities that provided them. 23 million, you know, registered for the first time, but of that 23 million, you know, hardly any stayed there. You know, 80% never came back again, you know, after the first year. But, you know, again, this Mooc participation is concentrated entirely on the most affluent countries. You know, there's very little participation from countries that are developing, which is a shame because it is free, and there is some value to it. You know, there's not saying it's totally invaluable, because it is, you know. And also too, pre-COVID, of course, there was the mobility of students was quite extraordinary too. You know, 1.3 million in 1990 to 2.1 million in the year 2000 to 5 million students in 2014 were traveling internationally to visit schools for, you know, universities for education. They weren't staying in their own country. 2014, this again is old data. I think 2020, you can be fairly sure this has doubled. And this is despite the fact that, you know, some of the courses are expensive. You know, that often international students, especially in Ireland and the UK, are charged double the fees, some treble the fees sometimes, you know. The Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, for example, take a lot of international students in for do medical degrees, and they charge them in the region of 70,000 euros per year, where the Irish student pays 3, you know, which is, I think, is wrong. But you know, at the end of the day, even state universities are money machines. They think in terms of money, which is very, very sad, and that's not addressing what we need to do for the future. So I think education must be inclusive. It's kind of bringing you to the point of how I've ended up in this space. I want to make education inclusive. I want it to be quality, and I want nobody to be left behind. If anybody wants to learn, I don't see a reason why they shouldn't. And I don't see a reason why they should be stopped. So I really think that artificial intelligence may be the way forward. At the moment, part of my research at Cambridge is developing an artificial intelligence robot that's designed around artificial neural network technologies. It is going to be called probably TutorBot or ProfessorBot. And the basic idea is that as we move to somewhere between asynchronous and synchronous learning, the ProfessorBot or TutorBot, whatever you want to call it, will be there for the student to become personalized for the student. The student will not be inhibited in asking the bot questions that may feel embarrassed about asking in a class or even on an online class. It will also help to fill in the space, the administrative space that teachers very often are bogged down with that kind of stuff they don't need to be. The chatbot will learn from the student as much as the student learns from it. But initially, it's got to be programmed with a certain amount of information, the coursework, what's the standard questions, what's the standard answers, but the chatbot learns alongside the student. And of course, it also learns from the other chatbots too. So it's a continuous learning mechanism, true dialogic approach, a true transformational learning approach where the students and the teacher and because the chatbot will share the information with the teacher too as to how the student is doing, it'll also be programmed such that it will ask the student and try and test it on key aspects of the course and see what memory is like. So it'll also understand how the student learns too, and to be able to personalize that learning for the student as well. And I believe there's really the only way that we are going to address the needs given the I suppose, the lack of resources that exist in schools, and very often teachers can, trying to teach a class of 30 or 40 is impossible, frankly. You have to look at a pedagogy that suits all, not one that can be personalized. So I do think that having the assistant, we'll say, teaching assistant, which is the artificial technologies, can be that tutoring and support, which is outside of the classroom. So the students can understand a bit more and ask without any fear of inhibition or any fear of laughing about them or any fear of inadequacy by asking those questions. So now a latest report has come out to say that education will grow by almost 50% through artificial intelligent means between 2017 and 2021. I don't know, has that been on track or not? I haven't gone back to check that, but I can't help feeling that it may not be too far off. So finally, my journey started with this to help bring education inclusive, trying to make it accessible. That's why I set up Longford College. It's now hopefully going to be university in the next year or two. And it's been designed to give a second chance, from anybody, for example, an unmarried mother that's stuck at home for the first 5 years with a young child. Those 5 years could be really put to good use in getting education that she probably missed out on because of, getting pregnant and the father not standing by her. So, but what's actually happened is, of course, then begin to think that I'm a really lousy businessman, because I started off to help those who needed help, and I've ended up helping the rich and famous. And here's a few of our recent graduates. They're very famous football stars from Chelsea Football Club. They were our first group, along with several more. Cesar Azpilicueta, Kappa there, and we have Willie Carabaro. These guys are paid, I know Cesar is common knowledge, is paid €1 million per month. Kappa there, for example, the lad in the middle there, that's barely in his 20s, is paid something similar, and he costs something like €70 million when they brought him from another club. And Willie Carabero there came from Manchester City and is probably paid €500,000 a week too. So this is extraordinary when these guys have approached us. Them and many more, I have to say. There are still many more footballers from Manchester United, and you can see the main ones, the main cohorts: Leeds United, Lazio, and Rome. There are many more. So it's kind of, maybe this is God's way of helping me get to the people that need help. But right now, that's where it's sort of started. It's an extraordinary journey, I have to say, and one that I really hope that brings me where it is I really want to go. Anyway, so thank you for your time. I'm sorry I probably rattled on a bit too much today.
So thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the session, which was very informative. Hope all the participants got benefit out of it. You really stressed upon the requirements of the future and also foresight about the future education system and what are the things we have to develop by both students and teachers' point of view. Thank you so much for the informative session. Now, may I request Reverend Sister Maria to brief the presentation?
Good morning. I am Sister Maria from Kenya. Just I am briefing Mr. Vincent's presentation. He was talking about his vernier technology. He has a company and he is manufacturing the lab equipments, digital physics lab, chemistry lab equipments he is manufacturing. That's what he was saying. He is the owner and CEO of that company. And he was saying that the pandemic is challenging us to adopt technology. And by all means, we have to rely on technology, and that's what we are learning on through technology. So he's saying that technology is very important to communicate and to make the world one. From here, we can connect it through America or Europe. Now he's talking from Ireland. So this pandemic is helping us to challenge ourselves, to think more on technology and to bring good ideas. And he was mentioning that India has great people and the whole world is believing that Indians can solve the world's problem. Even the field of technology or medical or business. And there is a great hope that Really, they are scientists, mathematicians, and really Indians can help the whole world. So personally, what I want to tell that if the particular child or a human being, if they are not becoming scientist or mathematician, we have to think what we are missing. So the world is expecting us to be mathematicians, genius, or doctors, or anything. If we are not becoming one within our country educational system, we have to think again. And equality in education, and Finland, the population is very low, and the education system is really very good, and it is recognized all over the world. They have the best education system in Finland. So we can refer that one, and we make our education system better. And he was appreciating Asian countries like China, India, and other countries. They are really trying their level best. And when he was talking about teachers and students, the teacher should be in the middle of the students, not talking in front of the students, talking more than 2 hours, 3 hours, and we don't know whether the students, they got something. So what he was telling, and we go to the middle, and we should be one among them. And it is good to, before we take any class, and we give them the assignments, just to prepare. For example, tomorrow I am going to talk about shapes, mathematical shapes. Just you tell the students that what are the utensils in the kitchen you see? What are the shapes of this cooking pot? Or this one, you mention, you write. And what is the, whether it is a cylinder or cone or anything, just you can give the prior assignments. The student can give lots of ideas, just let it have a discussion. Not 2 hours, 3 hours teaching and making the students tired. At the end, we feel they get nothing. And robotics, artificial intelligence and robotics, it is very, very important. You are saying that it is now the world is relying on technology. And artificial intelligence, it is nothing but automatic classroom cleaner, automatic, you can call the students, you tell that, just imagine, we are going to make a broom which can sweep automatically. So what are the things needed? The students playfully, they mention 1, 2, 3, and we discuss, and we help them how to learn, where to get the materials and what. And at the end, 1 or 2 months or 3 months, in 6 months, you definitely have that automatic classroom cleaner or ground cleaner or anything. That is the innovation. You take it to the market and make it a business. And the students, some money to buy themselves to buy foods or clothing or a big house. So this is the way the teaching and learning should be there. And he was referring many countries, and Europe, America, Cambridge University, and many reference he gave us how to learn. And students, they are participating in international competitions, and they are traveling everywhere. So the ideas are shared internationally. So there are a lot of chances are there, and they can make it the product money. So it is very easy that through technology, people can be rich, and we can eliminate poverty. And a half-day work. I know that Americans or Europeans, they go to class in the morning, afternoon, they go for work. They can be table boy, they work in the hotel, or they work in the streets, or wherever. They work in the afternoon. They earn money while they are studying. They pay their tax, or they pay the students, the children are 13 or 14 or just small, they should be taught how to earn money. At the end of 70 or 60, they are dying without food. No, they should know how to earn money when they are so young, or when they are this one. We can do it legally, and we encourage both working and learning. And he was encouraging us, and he has a thirst for the world that to eliminate poverty. People should die. We should not die out of hunger or thirst or anything. So this is a good chance for us to let us recall our education system and rethink and what we can do better for the society, especially to eliminate this poverty from our world. And when someone was talking to me over the phone, mentioning that people have no computer, we cannot force them to buy the bundles or to buy a computer or something. So these are the drawbacks and these are the challenges we have in our country. How we can overcome, let us think, and we help the fellow human beings. There is no different. In many things we are seeing many differences. It is not at all appreciable or appreciated, or it is not good. So all these problems can be solved through educations. And so we have to see our education system and make it better and make our country wonderful, charming, and we help the whole world. Thank you. I take this opportunity to thank I know he's an inspiring man. I know him more than 7 years. I'm very grateful, sir. And really, I asked him a word and he accepted and he spent his time for us. It is a great contribution he made for us. I'm very grateful and thank you, sir. And I also take this opportunity to thank Cuddalore College and Sister Sahayam and the team really for vibrating and making this good information to the people. And may God bless you all. Thank you one and all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sister. Thank you for your excellent presentation. Dear participants, it's time for interaction. If you have any queries or doubts, you can drop your queries in the chat box. If you have any queries or doubts, you can drop it in the chat box. Vincent, sir? Sir, Vincent, sir, could you hear me?
Yeah, do you want me to answer some questions?
No, yeah. Some of
Okay.
the participants have raised a question.
Okay, so I
One of
have
the
one.
participants. Okay. One of the participants named Vijay, he has raised a query that how digital teaching can be effective to weaker students, those who don't understand at Go 1.
So how can digital education be more effective to weaker students, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, some research has come out, which is quite extraordinary too, that weaker students, and well, it depends what you mean by weaker students, but some of them are very effective at some of these games that they have, and gaming education and stuff is also finding traction, I see, in the academic world. As I believe that, again, as I reiterated in the lecture, that even in a classroom, a situation where there are 30 students, 40 students, no teacher can or has the ability to, I suppose, have the time to look after students that need different needs. You know, some students learn in different ways. Some students learn by pictures, some students learn by rote learning, some students learn simply by transmission and talking to peers. So I believe, and my vision for the future is that the teacher will give the direction, will provide the content, and will provide the framework and some basic explanations of how and what the construct will be. And it's then down to artificial intelligence that can be personalized to suit the learning styles of the students, whether they are slow learners, whether they are fast learners. But not only that, I think the education system of the future has got to address what the needs of the industry will be. A friend of mine, when I was doing physics many years ago, he was really challenged when it came to theoretical, but he was gifted when it came to the practical. And today he is one of the key scientists or key engineers at NASA, and he helps with an awful lot of the space technology programs, because he was able to take a lot of the theory that we learned and transfer it practically into sort of electronics or whatever it might be. And that's a gift that he had that none of us had. So I think that the education of the future will use technology to address the needs, the special needs, and the different learning needs of different people, and make them more, let's just say, focused and useful into the working environment. I think that's what we have to embrace technology for. I think the pedagogical content and the structure's got to be provided by the teacher, but the specializations must come from the technology.
Thank you, sir. Another question from Anoza. Children as all technology, do we teachers has a powerful evaluation system?
Evaluation systems are different. I noticed that Europe is moving away to the inquiry-based learning now, where it's not so much examination, it's more continuous assessment. But then you have the problem, of course, then that you have a generation of teachers that don't quite understand how these new evaluation systems should be implemented, and they're probably outside their own comfort zone. So now you're looking at a generational change. It's something that I don't believe that can happen in a single generation. You do have to start from the ground up. And that's the point I was making. The time has now come. The playing field has become far more level than it's ever been before. And that demarcation between the developed countries and the developing countries is now becoming somewhat of a blurred boundary. And that's why I was sort of saying to, especially India, I think more than any other country, the opportunity now for you guys to seize the moment, to take advantage of this new approach and the new abilities that could be conferred upon you is now, you know, and you can catch up very, very quickly, I think, by embracing technology in the right way. So evaluation systems is not easy. There is no perfect one because everybody is different. But the Finns do seem to have one which allows the students to express themselves and to be what they should be, not what we think they should be. And I think an evaluation system has not only got to support that, but able to encourage and mentor it and to measure it correctly.
Thank you, sir. This query is from Lavanya. How could we make bachelor students aware of the new technology, and how could we inculcate these things without changing the curriculum?
That's a challenge for sure. The curriculum is always the stumbling block. It's and the problem we have in many countries, again, this does not apply to Finland, but in many countries across Europe, we have what they call teaching to the test, where the students know what the examination will be at the end of the year. The textbooks are quite rigid in how they approach it. The curriculum is also very rigid too, even down to the layout of how you do the exam and how you present the materials and how you present the experiment. So I think it's going to be a struggle, but as I said, that there has to be a position where we reset. There has to be a position where we start again. It's going to be very difficult to come into with a pedagogical approach in midstream and make these tumultuous changes, because I don't think it would be possible. But what I do think, while we look at a complete new approach like the Finns have done in Finland, we should look to see what we can do to leverage technology to help. And it's all about, at the moment, helping students understand the concepts in their own way and to be able to communicate it back in their own way, obviously in the correct way. And I think all we can hope for right now is that we do produce students which think differently, which are more self-sufficient, which think outside the box, which are more creative, which are able to hit the ground running quicker than students ever have before when they either go to university or when they go to get a job. And we have to look at these changes happening in a kind of a dynamic way, not something that we start and restart again in a completely new direction. Nothing will change, but nothing will change if nothing changes. That's what you have to be, you have to remember. So that change must start in small bits until they hit a tipping point when the change can be profound. And because the Finnish government and the Finnish curriculum has instilled upon their population, especially their teachers, the need to be creative and the teachers to put their own input, has made that change a lot easier. So we're looking at a generational change here. We're looking, but there's nothing stopping us right now embracing technology the way it is and maximizing it and using every last bit of it that we can to make the learning experience better and to make it more productive. So there's no easy fix. It can't be. You have to engage it in a way that's creative and that runs in parallel. with the rigid curriculum or the rigid education structures. It's down to teachers. That's the point I'm making. You are the most important people in the world. You're the most important cogs in any economy. You know, without you, there is no education output. Without you, there is no leaders of the future. Without you, there is no people who follow your example. So you are key, absolutely key. And if the government doesn't work with you, you must take it upon yourself to do your own thing and to make those changes yourself. And eventually momentum develops and eventually changes go through. That's the way it is with everything. Sorry, could you unmute yourself?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
This query is from Franklin. What is the scope of research and development in the digital era?
What is, sorry, what?
What is the scope? Yeah.
Scope?
What is the scope of research and development in the digital era?
It's coming from a lot of different places. It's coming from the pure, let's just say, the cybernetics end in its true sense, coming from the study of, we'll say, data analytics is coming through that area, artificial neural network technologies, looking at machine learning, looking at predictive analytics. So a lot of it is coming that way, and a lot of the change in artificial intelligence has been driven by industry, naturally enough, because that's where the greatest gain can come, is through industry applications. And education then is picking up then on some of the useful affordances of the technological gains, I'd say in military too, unfortunately, but in industry. So the research space then is, especially on the education sense, is picking up then on the technologies, for example, how they can be integrated into education. Things like interactive whiteboards, smart handheld devices, right the way through then to the more philosophical views. And my particular area is bridging that between the conversational technology, Diane Laurielard's conversational framework, for example, through dialogism and dialogue approach through Rupert Weigeriff and his team, and then trying to make that practical then by merging that with the practicalities of artificial intelligence. So the approach that we're taking is probably a bit different, is that we're using the academic theory, we're using academic research into how students learn, the most effective ways to learn, and building that into the features of the chatbot that we're developing. But in terms of the research and education space, it's kind of all over the place. There are people coming in from we'll say online learning for education in adults, taking in, we'll say, emerging between the second life technologies in terms of the gaming aspect of learning. So it's coming from an awful lot of spaces at the moment, and it's merging in some respects in some areas, but unfortunately not every area. So it is quite wide ranging. There's no real literature streams that are appearing at the moment. And if you do certainly a literature review search, you'll find out there's very, very little in academia and in education, we'll say, in the last 2 to 3 years. It's only now that it's beginning to gather some, literally in the last 6 or 8 months, is starting to gather some kind of momentum towards education. So very, very soon yet to kind of point to any particular areas where research into artificial intelligence for education purposes only is starting to become a center of attention.
Okay, so thank you. This query is from Julaika. Which is your preferred MOOC platform and why?
What's my preferred what, sorry?
Which is your preferred MOOC?
Oh, my preferred Mooc. They all have, okay, they're all good in their own respects. They're all pretty much the same, if I'm honest with you. I think it comes down to, funny enough, the content with them is all quite good. There's FutureLearn I like, there's Coursera I like, there's Udemy I like too, the one from the edX, which is the one from the Harvard group. They're all pretty much the same, but I think if I was to say my preferences went down to how the literature material is laid out on a kind of a portal, if you like, and how I interface with them. I think the one I prefer the most would be Coursera, followed then by FutureLearn. And this is personal preference, because you can download all of the Coursera lecture materials in a single folder week by week by week, and it's a handy place to have it when you want to go back when the Mooc closes. But FutureLearn then has got another nice feature where it tells you how you're getting along and in terms of what you've finished and what you haven't finished. But I think in balance, if I were have a preference, it would be the Coursera one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your explanation and clear-cut explanation.
So finally, we have come to the end of the 2 days international webinar presented on the topic, the future of digital learning. Rome was not built in one day. So this webinar has turned out to be successful due to the long tiring efforts of many members. Thank you everyone for the cooperation. I convey my heartfelt thanks to our resource person, Mr. Vincent English, and our special guest, Reverend Sister Maria, for parting your valuable timing and knowledge with us. May I request Dr. R. Nitya, ICW Coordinator, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening to all. We raise our hearts in gratitude and thank the Almighty God for blessing us all with this delightful day. My heartfelt thanks to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Vincent Vernier Europe, MD, Professor, International Business Strategy at Universitica Telematica, Ireland, for making an excellent way of explaining and clarifying about the reshaping of education and virtual education are in need for the current scenario. And this international webinar is very meaningful and interesting. Sir, we can well understand your busy schedule and appreciate the effort you have taken your precious time with us. Thank you, sir. My special thanks to Sister Maria Sami, FIHM, American Texila University, Kenya, for awakening the passion and desire to support as a leader to reach the pole of success. Your constant encouragement has helped us in the best way. Thank you, dear sister. Words are not enough to express my sincere gratitude to our Reverend Sister Sagayam, Secretary, Immaculate College for Women, who are our mother, always stand by us, guide us, lead us, and molding us, that we are today. Thank you, dear sister, for your deep impact on us and the bonding that you have with us. It is all your sister. Thank you, dear sister. I also extend my thanks to our principal, Dr. M. Shushila Devi, Immaculate College for Women, for rendering us with all possible logistics support towards organizing this international webinar a grand success. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to all the participants for their enormous cooperation of this international webinar. I also thank to all our heads of the department, Immaculate College for Women, for the guidance and moral support. I am happy to express my thanks to our IQAC members, staff members, and administrative members for the minute-to-minute support and guidance for encouraging at every point of time. Last but not least, I conclude my words with Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. The best brain of the nation may be found on the last benches of the classroom. Once again, thank you all. Thank you. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for expressing your gratitude. I hope the participants are filled your feedback form. It's time to conclude our webinar. The Bible reads, "Surrender to the Lord all your plans, and your plans will succeed." I thank all the Almighty for making this program a most successful one through your song. Thank you, participants. Thank you for your timely participation. Have a good day.